And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics 101, a special show this evening. We are not usually on Friday evenings, but we are on tonight because of special circumstances. As we were coming off air last night, we got news that the government continues to undermine IDPADA-G. And we did talk about IDPADA-G last night because I was making the point that while in the budget we see in a satisfactory way that they've set aside some money for what is called Amerindian development. And my goodness, you know, we are totally in support of that because we think in a real way, Amerindian situation is special. Their circumstances having been here before Europeans and Africans and East Indians and Chinese and Portuguese got here. The fact that they were here before, we feel that puts them in a particular category. We are very clear about that. We are very clear about that. And there was a letter from somebody called Mike Singh responding to Vincent Alexander, asking why African people are special. Well, we are special because we came here against our will and we underwent centuries of chattel slavery, never seen in any other part of the world. That's why we are special. And I was making the point last night that yes, Amerindians are special and there should be, we have absolutely no problem with funds set aside in the budget for Amerindian development. But our circumstances, meaning African Guyanese circumstances, are equally special and so therefore deserves to be treated as a special people, a particular people of a particular circumstance. And I was making the point that at the very least, the United Nations said very clearly, despite changes in the law, Nandla like talk about the law, despite changes in the law, African people across the world continue to be victims of institutional racism. Dedicated decade to it. The Guyana government signed on to that. They signed on to it. And this government is violating that agreement by withholding funds from IDPADA-G, the official body that was created to oversee our observances for the decade. This is not what somebody tell me I was there. I read some foolish person, I can't remember who it was, so I don't want to call name. You read so many things when the day come, you forget sometimes who said what. Some foolish person asking how we got to IDPADA-G and who created. That's black people business who IDPADA-G is and how it was created. What I do know is that when President Granger announced the initiative at the Coffee 250 annual state of the African Guyanese, State of the African Guyanese annual conference, he was there and he announced this initiative. And as he came off the stage, he walked past myself and Vincent Alexander were standing off stage. He was being accompanied by one of our sisters in Coffee 250. And he said to Vincent and I, you all have to make this thing happen. That's where it came from, and that's how Vincent Alexander got involved. I did not get integrally involved because I am not in Guyana all of the time. So this is not some scam on the part of Alexander and whoever else. This is something that the president announced publicly, and then it became part. That money had to go through. Whatever money IDPADA-G, it has to be passed by the National Assembly. Not some slush fund. And the government continues to attack IDPADA-G. Wants to starve African Guyanese. Wants to starve African Guyanese of resources, and at the very least recognition of the plight, the particularity of their condition. So that's why we're on here tonight, and please spread the link. Let people know that we're on. I know you're not accustomed to having Politics 101 on a Friday evening, and we understand that. So we're going to have Vincent Alexander here. He's ready to go. And we're going to have one of the attorneys, because as you remember, after they took the money away or withheld the money from IDPADA-G, IDPADA-G went to court. And the court case is now before the courts. And the government is playing games there. And IDPADA-G has gotten wind of a particular game they're playing, which they want to bring to the attention of the public. And so we're going to have Brother Vincent on, and one of the lawyers for IDPADA-G, Mr. Vivian Williams. They're going to join us to bring us up to date of the recent games that the government is playing with IDPADA-G and by extension, African Guyanese. Of course, we can't have Vincent on without talking about what's happening in GCOM. That's a whole new story there. And since we have Vincent here, we're going to talk about that. So we'll talk about GCOM first, and then move to the attacks on IDPADA-G. On Politics 101, I know Friday evening it's not, but it's good that some of you are here. Good evening, Mr. White from East Bank. Good evening, Terry and Grenville, Belgium people, Belgium Eldorado. Jason, Princess. Good evening to all of you, Sheila G. Welcome to Politics 101, faithful 101ers. And I hope the others will join us as we go along. Ricky Passad or Rocky Passad, whatever your name is. I have respect for human beings. But this is not a place you should be. This environment is too rich for your kind. We don't play around here. One of the things that Guyanese, Caribbean people, of all race, of all ethnicity, one of the things we have great respect for is education. And we're not talking here just about formal education. I can tell you when African Guyanese came out of that slave plantation in 1838, one of the first things they do is set up schools. And my brother, this is not a school for you. You have signed on to the PPP to come and interfere with Black people when the afternoon comes. And then when you go home on the night, your children ask your daddy what you did today. I went on Politics 101 to interfere with Black people. Brother, go and do something different with your time. Brother Vincent.
Good evening, good evening.
Good evening, my brother. Sorry to pull you out at such short notice, but as an old timer, you know that the struggle goes on, whether it's Friday evening, Saturday evening, or whatever. We are rolling on a Friday night. Let's go straight into our conversation. GCOM. We've been reading in the last week all kinds of stories that's coming out from GCOM. One in particular that they are stifling, filling the position of deputy CEO. But as I understand it, hiring somebody else who's doing a job similar to the CEO. What's going on? What's going on? Tell us.
All right, there's three things we ought to note about GCOM at this time. The first one has to do with the outstanding issue of the manner in which the list was extracted. And you may recall that that matter was in court, and there was a court hearing on that matter during the course of last week. And the time has been given to the sides to make additional submissions. What is that matter? That matter is that we're having a local government election. And for the proper conduct of that election, the list should be extracted based on the boundaries of the constituencies and the local government areas, after which persons should be allowed to go through what is called a claims and objections exercise to ensure that people who do not reside in those areas are not on those lists and therefore not in a position and or to be voted for, as well as to ensure that dead people are not on the list. Now, GCOM did not extract the list based on constituencies and voters. They extracted the list based on the normal electoral divisions. And so that matter was taken before the court. GCOM has subsequently partially recognized their wrongdoing and sought to use a mechanism called advertence to publish a list and to allow people to have corrections made on the basis of advertence. That is not equivalent to claims and objections, and therefore still does not carry out the procedure required, as well as in publishing the list in relation to advertence, they used the dimensions, the constituency boundaries that were announced, gazetted by the minister, which he ought not to have done. And so that is one problem we're faced with. The second problem is the gazetted issue, where GCOM came to the conclusion that in fact, the minister had no authority to demarcate constituencies, and therefore GCOM itself should embark on that exercise. GCOM sought to embark on the exercise, but the continuous problem we've had is on one hand, in various ways, still trying to what the minister did, and not using the criteria which ought to be used for demarcation. And so that has become a matter of dispute in GCOM. And so we have not been able to complete that exercise of demarcation because under dispute would be the demarcation of 19 areas, because to date, the criteria of community, geography, and the population have not been applied. In particular, the criteria of community has not been applied, and the criteria of geography been presented as divisional boundaries. Geography is far more than just regional boundaries. It has to do with issues of topography and natural factors like the kind of where there are rivers, the kind of vegetation, whether the area is one that is agricultural or otherwise. Those criteria have not been applied. And so that matter continues to be a contentious matter. And so we're in a situation where we have had I can no longer call it the postponement. When you postpone to a date. And we do not know of a date when these elections will be held because of these outstanding matters. So that is critical that those two things be understood by the electorate who are awaiting the announcement of a date of elections, bearing in mind that in any circumstance, there are those of us who have problems with the use of the list that's available because no solution has been found to taking off the names of dead people. They always emphasize, in particularly, the thousands who died overseas and whose names are still on the list, given the fact that there is unrefutable evidence that such names were used in 2020 to cast votes. So that even as we overcome the hurdles I've referred to, how the list was extracted, how the constituencies are demarcated, there is the age-old problem of a list which is riddled with names ought not to be there, and the fact that evidence has been presented to show that those names are used and the list is manipulated to have fraudulent votes cast. A more recent issue, probably not so recent, is the question of the appointment of someone to a contrived position referred to as the operations coordinator. Now, we all know that GCOM has vacancies, and you should all know that the Commission has been very slothful in filling those vacancies. And among those is the position of the Deputy Chief Elections Officer. Those vacancies were advertised mid last year. Shortlisting was done, but there has been a slothful approach to filling of the vacancies. We have filled one of them, that is the Assistant Chief Elections Officer. And even in filling that, there was a contrived approach where we got applicants. They were deemed not to be applicants who meet the criteria. The advertisement was done. We had a new applicant who was added to those previously deemed not to be meeting the criteria. So we went back and say, well, they meet the criteria. Having added the new applicant, and then sought to employ the new applicant on the contention the new applicant was superior to those other applicants. Suffice to say that it was contrived to have that applicant make an application after applications had been closed and eligible persons had been shortlisted. And the new applicant is someone who is a retiree of GCOM, well beyond the age of retirement in the public sector, but we have sought, having contrived to have that application made, to appoint that person. What's of interest at this point in time is that when the Chief Elections Officer wrote to the chairperson indicating he was under pressure because, as I had said previously, he didn't have the support of the necessary officers because of vacancies, vacancy of the deputy chief, the vacancy of the voter and civic education manager. Those are vacancies, among others, vacancy of the logistics manager. And we're not expediting those But against the background of us calling for them to be expedited, writes to the chairperson, said, I'm under pressure. Well, nothing new, we knew that. And what is the response? They seek to establish a temporary position referred to as operations coordinator. The establishment, however, is in breach of what the Constitution provides for. The Constitution specifies that staffing of GCOM is the purview of the commission. Whether it's temporary staffing, whether it's permanent staffing, it's under the purview of the commission. But the CEO writes to the chairperson, who then establishes a position, temporary though it might be, called operations manager without any reference to the commission. And not only does she establish that position, she goes on to appoint the information technology manager to that temporary position. So she does two things that she should not do. One, she should not single-handedly establish a position, albeit temporary. And two, she should not be appointing someone to that position. Both of those things ought to be done by the commission. Or if the commission delegates, then the delegate could do it. And that was done on the 9th of November. 9th of November. No information was brought to the commission from the 9th of November up to the 10th of January. In fact, I would contend everything was done not to have the commission discuss the matter, because I do recall on one occasion, the deputy in the Information Technology Division attended a meeting. And I asked, why are you here? Where is your manager? And he said he had been delegated to attend. And no one else, and the chairman in particular, said nothing. And the reason why he was attending was because his manager had been, as has now been revealed, seconded to be the operations coordinator. No one told us that. But by virtue of correspondence where there was a carbon copy to that office, we asked the question, why is there something copy to someone called the operations coordinator? And then we were told of this position. When we raised the matter, the chairperson said, well, we will send you the relevant documents, and we will look at that matter when you have the relevant documents. And that was one way of postponing looking at the matter. We got the relevant documents, and last Tuesday maintained that it was an ultra-virus act to have that appointment made. And what did the chairperson say? He said, look, last week Commissioner Roy was suggesting we vote on this matter. And since he's absent, let's postpone it and vote on the matter next week. So that rather than have the matter examined, look at what the law provides for, what Article 161A1 provides for, there's a suggestion that you merely vote. So, democracy has been reduced in this country to mere voting. When my knowledge of democracy says responsible behavior. That responsible behavior in the context of governance requires, for example, transparency, which is the application of the same conditions to different cases that might arise, which are of the same nature. That's what transparency means. What our chairperson says, let's vote. I then made an exposure of this matter in the media by way of an interview. that came out today. GCOM, which does not normally speak to the public, critical things are decided, we don't say anything to the public. But today, once the chairperson read the exposure, ran to the press to justify the action, to justify an ultra-virus unlawful action because jump high or jump low, chairperson, you do not have the authority to establish a position, do not have the authority to appoint anyone to any position, including the one that was established. And one has to look beyond those acts. See that one, there is a continuous delay of appointing the DCO. Two, the person who has been appointed to be the operations coordinator is in the position of DCO. And I dare say that that person does not meet the requirements to be appointed because he does not have the years of experience, and that by dragging out the recruitment of a DCO, you are providing time for that person to acquire the experience. And not only are you providing time, but you are now giving the person an appointment that you will argue has given the person the experience. So we see that there is an act not only of defiance of the law, but contriving to create a scenario for the eventual appointment of a favored person to the position of the DCU, as was contrived to have a CEO appointed who did not have the required experience, that was contrived. To have an ACU appointed who did not apply in the first instance, but the application was contrived. And now we are faced with the next scenario of the unfolding contrivance to ensure that the favored person appointed to the position of DCU. And in the meantime, having that person perform duties temporarily in an acting position under the signature of the CEO, of the chairperson, who says it's a secondment. It's not the first time we've had that. And it's not something in breach of any regulation. The fact of the matter is, if it's not the first time, previous occasion when that or something similar, it was condemned. The person who carried out the act reprimanded, but that also is now being used as the basis to say, well, it's not the first. And that is what GCOM has come to.
Vincent Alexander, they're giving us an update on what's going on at GCOM. As you notice, I allowed Vincent to speak uninterrupted because I want you all to get what's happening there. And in case you're joining us now, or you miss part of what Vincent is saying, you're contrived. And the way in which they're manipulating things. So you have someone who they want to be the DCEO. That person doesn't have the experience in terms of the number of years. So what do? You appoint somebody to another position, apparently create a new position, so that that person, you call it temporary. So they are serving in that position, ostensibly doing the job of the DCO while the DCO accumulates the years. What manipulation on the part. And I don't understand the chairperson who is charged in ensuring the integrity of what's going on there. Apparently seems to be lost, and I'm being very clear here as to what is going on. Vincent, What the commissioner saying about all of this?
I'm not hearing you clearly. I'm not hearing you clearly.
Yes, I was asking what are the PPP commissioners saying about all these goings on?
Oh, they are part and parcel of it. They are part
Ah,
and parcel of it. They actually come forward with presentations to suggest that there's absolutely nothing wrong and that the appointment should stand and we should get on with the business of GCOM in those circumstances. They are part and parcel of it. And that is why we see that the chairperson has said, well, let's vote on the matter. Has shown her hand because in the press release of GCOM today, here is the chairperson who said to the commission, we'll deal with this matter on Tuesday, and said that we'll probably vote on the matter. So if it's something to be dealt with on Tuesday, to be voted on, then the matter is not settled. But yet, you have a press release in which that chairperson goes on to say in the press release, accordingly, and I'm reading from the press release, Mr. Giddens' secondment will come to an end upon the appointment of a DCU. So she's saying, in other words, don't worry with them. He's appointed. And it will come to an end with the appointment of the DCU. So this thing is infinite. We don't know when it will come to an end. And having told us we'll vote in the matter Tuesday, that statement says, don't worry with Tuesday. This thing comes to an end. And so you may still have a vote on Tuesday, and we know what is likely to occur, but we are faced with contempt of the chairperson overruling her own ruling that we can have a vote and saying to us, this office will continue to be until a DCO is appointed, which means she's saying to us, we have already decided this matter. Don't worry, Charlie. That's what we face with.
Vincent, yes. Vincent, you are a commissioner, but you've been involved in elections long before you were a commissioner as a member of the People's National Congress. In fact, you are considered one of our few experts on local government in general. I wanted to put on that hat outside of GCOM. Where is all of these machinations? Where are they leading us?
It leads to the emergence of a state which seeks to control, not through the legitimate mechanisms of control, but through manipulation and through dictatorship. So in fact, we are moving in the direction of a totalitarian state. The fact that the chairperson outside of GCOM's meeting can say to us that this office will continue to function until a certain time, although she had said we will vote on the matter, clearly points to totalitarianism at the institutional level as much as we are seeing totalitarianism at the national level, where all of the principles of democracy cast to the side and a party, by virtue of majority in an election over which there are many question marks, seeks to impose itself on the society, not taking into consideration the elements of good governance that requires transparency, that requires openness, that requires accountability. And so whether it's in the oil sector or whichever sector, the government refuses to tell the people what's happening, and they do these things as if they have any reference to the electorate, when democracy clearly says that are voted in is responsible behavior, which really speaks to good governance, and also response, which speaks to a government listening in between elections to the voices of the people and being responsive to those voices and not telling us that they're elected and therefore they could do their own thing. That is not democracy. Democracy has three legs it stands on. Elections. That one in Ghana is already questionable. Responsible behavior. And that one is founded on good governance, accountability, transparency, openness, ethical behavior. And that is in question in Guyana. And responsiveness, that is being responsive to the population. I went to a consultation in relation to RUPA. And that consultation was merely to give the government an opportunity to say what it was going to do. Nothing that anybody said there. In fact, I was denied an opportunity to make a most critical point. And so we have neither proper elections nor responsible behavior in government, nor responsive behavior. So what we have is democracy in crisis and totalitarianism stepping into the place of the democracy.
Here we go. I muted myself. Vincent Alexander bringing us up to date with what's happening at GCOM. And we can see the plot thickens there. I've said over and over in this program, the rigging begins at GCOM long before the elections. There's one thing, or the 6th day and the recount taught us. Whether you can argue whether it was constitutional or not constitutional, it taught us one thing, that the rigging of elections in Guyana begins long before election day. And what Vincent Alexander has been saying to us every time he comes on to this program and every time he speaks publicly, and he has been saying it tonight, is that there is a plot to compromise the election in GCOM. The 3 commissioners appointed by the opposition are standing firm to prevent the rigging from happening. But it seems as though the other side is determined to do it. So I want us to take very seriously what Vincent said here tonight. I want us to take it very seriously because some of us are beginning to talk about winning an election. We are not going to win an election if we don't win the fight to prevent the tampering with the election from inside of GCOM, tampering with the process, tampering with hiring. We gotta be very vigilant. We gotta be very vigilant because as we saw in 2020, you quote unquote win or quote unquote lose based on the manipulation that is done before the election. Vincent, thank you so much for that update. And we'll watch in the coming days because I'm seeing these press releases coming out of GCOM very fast, thick and fast these days. My old comrade and brother Kofi, who you know very well, Vincent Kofi would say, the press releases are coming out with reckless abundance. Something that never happened before. Something is up at GCOM and we have to keep the spotlight there. Vincent, anything else on that topic you want to say before we move on to the IDPADA-G issue?
Well, I just want to say that, consciousness is critical. We're making information available to the public. I think the public will be in a position to make the judgment because there are days ahead of us. We will see more things unfold. And as those things unfold, we will see, in fact, that the plot which I referred to has been embraced and there are attempts to advance that plot. And the public should be conscious because at the end of the day, the determination has to be made by the people of Ghana as to whether they will allow themselves to be subjugated and illegally controlled, or whether they will, as a people, do what is necessary to ensure that the so-called democracy of 1992.
Very much, Vincent. And on that note, we move on to the issue of IDPADA-G and the government. We expect one of the lawyers for IDPADA-G to be joining us. He's having some technical difficulties, and we'll see whether he sorts that out before we come to the end of the program. But Vincent, let's move into that. Give us the background of where we are as far as GCOM, sorry, not GCOM, IDPADA-G and the government. We know that that the government has been withholding subventions, that is funds, from IDPADA-G. And we know that you went to court to challenge that action. I'll take it from there.
Well, the first thing is, it is correct that as of September 2022 to date, the government has not released the monthly subvention, which we had been having as of 2018 up to August 2022. They've not released it. Not only have they not released it, but they have not ever said to IDPADA-G that they are not releasing it and why they're not releasing it. What we have witnessed, however, is a vice president in the public attacking IDPADA-G for what he refers to most recently as mismanagement. IDPADA-G has been subject to, in the first instance, a summons by the Minister of Youth, Culture, Youth and Sports in 2022, and 3 questions were posed to us on that occasion. We answered the 3 questions and took the opportunity then to request a meeting with the minister. That request has never been responded to. The next thing we knew, we were subject to a special unit from the Ministry of Finance being sent to do what they call an investigative audit in 2021. They came, they investigated, they reported. We exposed all of our documents to them. And that audit carried over to 2022 when they came for a second round with the same result. But interestingly, whilst that was happening, we had that vice president on every occasion where he addressed people of African descent, and in particularly the Association of African Guyanese Business Persons, saying to them that Alexander got $100 million, have you guys gotten any of it? He said that to them in those fora. Then comes his accusation that we have a private company and that we are beneficiaries of the $100 million. The fact of the matter is that we have a company that is registered under the Companies Act, where it is clearly defined that it is a not-for-profit company, and that all that we do is to the benefit of the African Guyanese community, and that if by any chance that company is wound up, that whatever assets the company has should go to an organization similar to IDPADA-G, or to activities similar to the activities to be being undertaken by IDPADA-G. Everything about the company says that the directors, so-called, are in no way beneficiaries of anything. They're volunteers in the context of the decade seeking to do work in the interests of the people of African descent. And that it is not merely these directors, but there is an assembly of IDPADA-G, which for all intents and purposes constitute the membership of the company, where ultimately decisions are made. And that our activities were never defined merely as the granting of grants. That's what the Vice President seeks to tell the nation. Instigate people, y'all didn't get the money because they got money to give you all grants they didn't give you. And what is evidence of that? This evidence of that is a distortion of the fact that in 2018, at the end of 2018, Minister Jordan, under a discretionary fund, gave us $10 million to give out grants. 10 million. We gave out over 600 something million in 2019. And there was a residual sum of 343,000 plus that we gave out in 2020. So our accounts show that in 2020, we gave out 343,000 in grants. You know what the guy says? He says they get 100 million and they only give out 343,000 in grants. What happened to the rest of the money? That's the kind of manipulation of information that he had, which we gave because we have nothing to hide, that he is going through to try to tell the public that something is wrong with how we handle the funds. He then goes on to say that we have a staff who gets 42 million of the 100 million. So Black people ain't getting nothing, some paid staff. But he insinuates that we, the directors, the members of the coordinating council, getting some of this money. Well, the first thing is, we even as when you talk about the money our staff gets, you have to talk about that in the context of service to the people of African descent. For example, if our staff organizes an exhibition as we did in Main Street, where entrepreneurs of African descent can exhibit their wear, then they're not simply being paid, our staff, they're not simply being paid, they're being paid to do things that are beneficial to the people of African descent. And when we hold an exhibition like that, we do prior marketing training, prior packaging training, prior accounting training with those people. And so when our staff does that work, they're being paid to do that. You know, I saw recently Minister Ejil telling the people of African descent, contractors, that he's going to help them to know how to tender for contracts. He's telling them that. IDPADA-G has held more than one workshop that we paid for to educate small contractors how they should tender for contracts. We've done that. But they say we're not doing anything with the people of African descent. Now he's attempting to do what we have been doing over the past 2 to 3 years. But they have the gall to tell people we are not doing nothing for the people of African descent because we can give them grants. And when we give grants, it's in the limited framework to give grants. We have a minister literally invading the building in Annie Regina and taking it over, where we give the people resources to purchase tents, to purchase chairs, computers, so they can generate income for the region 2 cooperative union. They withdrew the money and matter to court. Basically, in court, they were called upon on the 18th of January, before the hearing of the matter on the 25th of January. On the 17th of January, they approached the court for urgent hearing as to why they have not filed the defense and instead has asked us for further details on the matter, claiming in a letter to us that they needed further details if they were to file their defense. We have responded to that letter, saying unequivocally that under the rules that govern a fixed date application to the court, there's no provision for them to request further details. And in fact, to suggest that they want further details to defend their action suggests that they took action without having the information that they claim is the basis for the action. And so now they want us with that information. But the fact of the matter is that all the information that we have has previously been supplied when the auditors came. All of the information previously supplied. And more than that, when the minister subsequently wrote us saying there was some complaint in the public domain, we responded saying, look, you are asking for information you already have. He's not responded to that. And we, in addition, said to the minister that up to 2021, you have audited, you've seen everything. So you've had full disclosure. We are offering you to do an audit in 2022 before the audit becomes due. So you can see what we're doing in 2022. They're not taking that offer up. It's in silence. But they were sorry, but they stopped giving us a subvention. And we have gone to court. And it's supposed to be heard in 2050. We are now faced with a situation where they have attempted two things. One, to drag out the matter by not filing a defense. And two, by saying to the court, well, we need more information and we want you to hear. Don't hear the 25th matter that you, the court, have set. Hear us ask for file of defense as we asked IDPADA-G for more information to file our defense. We have seen similarities with what they're doing, what the case. For example, like in the slow case, to drag the matter out so the life of the commission came to an end, so they could say that commission dead, this matter ain't got no life. But the courts have not entertained that argument then. And we have the firm conviction the court will not entertain that argument now. Let us face the court on the 25th. Let the court say that we have not made a prima facie case. If the court says that, the court can dismiss the matter. Or let the court say that we have made a prima facie case and therefore they will proceed to hear the case. That's where we're at.
You see a similarity there with the slow case, but we see a similarity with GCOM. The whole thing of tying up these things and manipulation and so on. Vincent, I understand that government is in the business of going around and collecting affidavits from people, which they intend to use in the case against IDPADA-G. Is that true?
We're not paying attention to that. And the reason why we're not paying attention, the time for them to file such affidavits has virtually expired. So I don't know if we have heard that they are, but for us, that's not a matter of contention because we know how the court will deal with the belated attempt. They have had time and they have had to admit that we filed in a timely manner. They had timely notice. And with all the notice on the eve of the day when they should be filing their defense, which should include those affidavits, they asked for more time. And then asked for the court to hear why they should have more time. So though that might be something that is happening, we are not at all bothered by that. Because what that would do is, in fact, to have people waste their time, because those things would be of no effect.
Alexander there, putting on his second hat here tonight and bringing us up to date with what's happening with IDPADA-G. They took away the subvention from IDPADA-G. IDPADA-G goes to court. One would think that if the government has acted so decisively, it would be ready to defend its action in court, only to find out that they are not ready to defend their action, which says that the action was arbitrary, vexatious, as the lawyers would say, dictatorial. When your government is acting in that way, you can understand if an individual acts that way. But here is your government on a very sensitive matter, withholding subvention from one section of your population that has to do with our history and our heritage. No shame, absolutely no shame. And then go to court and ask him for more time. You act. It's like bulldozing those people's homes at Moko. And of course, those people, I understand the PNC, the APNU, they have gone to court. You go to court and ask for more time after you demolish people's homes. The job that they've done on IDPADA-G is similar to the demolition. And this is me. They're attacking Black people at every twist and turn. Every twist and turn. IDPADA-G thing must be taken seriously. It's a marker. It's a marker. This is not something that we came up with, the United Nations. And Guyana is not the only government. There are governments across the region and the world that have acted on this mandate from the United Nations. And here you are talking about one we're not going to this matter to sleep. Vincent, what next from IDPADA-G? I know you've laid out, it's now in the hands of the court and so forth, but you feel you must come into the court of public opinion and let our people know what's happening. What are you all doing at IDPADA-G? You don't have the subvention, so you've had to take some actions, but you're still up and running. Give us an update on that.
Well, first of all, we're not going to go under because of what the government is seeking to do. We are volunteers. So the subvention doesn't interfere with the continued work of our coordinating council. They're volunteers. So we continue working as volunteers. I am proud to say that we have a CEO who is one of our paid persons, who has not abandoned the ship. She has decided that in the circumstance, she's volunteer. She's volunteer. And so among ourselves as volunteers, we are continuing the work of IDPADA-G. And we have had the kind assistance of persons, many of whom will remain unnamed for obvious reasons in Guyana, who have given us assistance in carrying out our work. We have been able to continue, though limited, to give support to the Sophia Night School so that those guys can continue to attend the pursuit of education. Sophia and Kildon. We've not given up on them. With our little pittance, we're still giving them assistance. And there are other activities that are ongoing. We are this time still compiling the information coming out of a survey we did across the country of the needs of people of African descent. That's where the money went. A survey. Just like how we did a survey of the Guyanese who had not gotten flood relief money and found that over 4,000 persons had not gotten, including Indo-Guyanese, and made a submission to the Minister of Agriculture. So we are continuing to work with our people, not to the detriment of anyone else, but to the benefit in the context of the UN's declaration that there is under recognition, unjust treatment, and underdevelopment of the people of African descent. And when one Mike Singer Prasad sought to respond to my letter where I genuinely laid out the case of the state of people of African descent by saying, why you want special treatment? I gave a short response. Some people say I shouldn't reply, but I responded because people need to be educated. And I hope that Mr. Singh is open to being educated. But where the land matter is concerned, that the way in which the land purchased by the people with the hard apprenticeship money, in which that land has been transferred to others and by others, is unjust. It is a defiance of the recognition we are due for having purchased that land. And if we remove from us a resource for development, no other group in this country is faced with that problem. And therefore, there is reason for special attention, not only by us, but by a state which is the successor state to the state or states that brought us to where we're at. And so the state has an obligation. The same way in which United Nations identified the plight of the Amerindians and gave them 2 decades. They've identified the plight of the people of African descent and so far given us 1 decade. And we look forward to another decade as we seek to redress and rectify. And I want to make a little comparison. The Amerindians have, and I prefer to say the indigenous people, there's a reason why the government has never supported calling them the indigenous people. When we tried to have them called the indigenous people when that act was being passed in 2012, I think it was, they refused. No, I think it was 2006. They refused. No, Amerindians. And we said no, there's a reason for that. But indigenous people have now been able to get billions to address their special circumstances. And we are being denied 100 million. Not to address our special circumstances. The 100 million can't do that. The 100 million really is to put us in a position to address those circumstances. To put us in a position where we advocate, we have consultations with our people, come up with our dilemma. And that consultation will cost more our staff to mobilize, cost money to get a collective position to take to the state in advocacy for the kind of consideration that our Armenian brothers and sisters, our indigenous brothers and sisters are presently getting. We arrived at the strategic plan through consultation. We visited Farm, we visited Linden, we visited parts of Georgetown, East Coast, Quarantine. That certainly couldn't represent a monetary deliverance to the people of African descent, but it represents spending the money which was allocated in the interest and the furtherance of the case of the people of African descent. And the Vice President dare challenge us in terms of mismanagement. If we have mismanaged, let them use the mechanisms that are in place for those who get subventions to be dealt with. Don't deal with us arbitrarily and capriciously taking away money as if it is their money. We are ourselves, by virtue of our taxes, contributors to the fund from which the money was drawn. 100 million. In terms of a budget of over 700 billion, 100 million is a drop in the sea and pittance that they're making an issue over as we try to represent African descent.
Thank you very much, Brother Vincent. If in 2023, someone is going to ask why special treatment for African Guyanese, it's either unmitigated ignorance or the worst kind of racial insensitivity. I couldn't believe it when I read that letter. I couldn't believe it. I know the fellow Mike Singh, and now know him by seeing him, and I was on a panel with him once or twice, I think. But I couldn't believe that. It shows the Guyana, and that is what the United Nations has said. Despite the laws that were passed to ensure racial equality, ethnic equality, that there is still resonances of what occurred on the plantation. And that when you listen to Mike sing, you understand why the United Nations was correct in drawing attention, because part of what we ought to be doing in this area is educating people of other ethnic groups. Vincent, anything you would like to leave us with?
I just wish to say to my brothers and sisters out there that this is not a matter of individuals, and that we must be careful with individualism, which seems to be the approach of the day, and to understand that we are social. We get individual treatment. At the end of the day, what affects one affects all. What affects this generation, if not addressed, this generation. And therefore, even as we, our individual being, as some are likely to do more than others, we must not forget that we are of a collective, and there is no future for us outside of the collective. Collective action is what will redeem us.
Collective action is the call from Vincent Alexander. Vincent, thank you very much for coming on a Friday evening. And the attorney at law did not get to come on. He had some technical difficulties. Next week, I will try to get him on one of the days to give the legal side. Not that Vincent doesn't give the legal side. In fact, people always think that Vincent is a lawyer. And I once asked him that question. He explained why he's so au fait with the law, although he is not a certified lawyer. And we've always had those types in Guyana, you know. Guyana, UC Guyana, the legendary UC Guyana, is not a certified lawyer. But when he would file cases back in the day, they would admit him to the bar, fight his own case, because like Vincent, he's a student of the law, and you know, that's not an easy task. In fact, lawyers have told me that Quina would call them up and point out things to them that they had overlooked. So that Vincent belongs to a particular type he have had in Guyana. Thank you again, my brother. Have a nice weekend, and we will be following both of these matters, both the GCOM matter and the IDPADA-G matter. Thank you much. Vincent Alexander, they're always coming through for us, and you have come through for us. I mean, the numbers have risen in the last hour. Short notice, Friday night. You all don't expect Politics 101 to be on, but I'm glad you came on for us to deal with these two matters. We are going to continue to follow these matters. We're going to try to get the attorney to come on sometime next week. He had some difficulties tonight. Thank you all so much for coming out on a Friday night. Have a political weekend. Do some political work wherever you are. There's so much to be done. CLR James, legendary CLR James, always said, there is always something to be done. And as James himself, borrowing from the Greeks, said, every cook can govern. So whatever your station in life, you have a role to play in leading our country out of the mess, leading our people out of the mess that we have been pushed into by the People's Progressive Party. We shall not rest, we shall not sleep, we shall not roll over and take the punches. We're going to punch back. We're going to punch back. We're going to punch back with all our faculties, because everything begins with the mind. If your mind is clear, You're in business. You're in business. Good night. Have, again, a very productive political weekend. Love you all. Love you all of you.